the fourth supposed indication of a common criminal plan, and that is set out in paragraph 27, and mentions that on the very day that the former president appointed Ronald de la Rosa Bato as the chief of Philippine National Police, de la Rosa issued a pre-drafted command circular number 16 of 2016 on 1st of July of that year, formally launching the anti-illegal drugs campaign nationwide in express pursuance of Duterte's campaign promises. There is no dispute that CMC number 16 of 2016 mentions Project Double Barrel, which was indeed modeled after Davao City's policing strategy and was directed at the neutralization of illegal drug personalities nationwide. But here we come to the crux of the prosecution case. The manifestation of the criminal plan in writing. Neutralization as a euphemism for murder. Ms. Robin Croft certainly thought so when making her submission on behalf of the prosecution, highlighting the word in bright red and presenting us with a slide where the word neutralization forms an integral element of the common plan. To import an element of criminality into what would otherwise be a perfectly anodyne legal document, the prosecution resorts to relying on speeches and interviews given by Ronald de la Rosa Bato within a day or two of him being appointed the chief of Philippine National Police. For example, in an interview relied on by the prosecution at footnote 136 of the pre-confirmation brief, De la Rosa explains how tok hang means knock and plead, and that it is a totally legitimate police strategy. However, the citations relied on by the prosecution to infer that tok hang was a criminal modus operandi are completely taken out of context. I shall just cite one question and answer from the media interview on which the prosecution relies at paragraph 27 to prove that De la Rosa, when talking about instilling fear in the hearts of drug users, was actually proposing a policy which was anything but criminal, envisaged by way of self-defense. And I quote, question, "Sir, you mentioned about instilling fear. When you instill fear, how do you ensure that you do not violate human rights?" Answer, good question. We will see to it that the police operational procedures are being followed in every legitimate police operations. When they see that the police are really determined to go for them legally, he stresses the word, and many of them go down, maybe they'll get scared. That's PHL OTP 000-16403 at page 13. In any event, what the prosecution has not told you, and what it has not shown you by way of its opulent images on the video screen, is that the supposed criminal blueprint set out in Command Circular 2016, number 16 of 2016, is totally negated by the content of the document itself. Let us take a look at paragraph 8E and F of the very same command circular, number 16 of 2016, which states quite clearly that all operations should strictly observe the rights of the accused enshrined in the Philippine Constitution, as well as international law and human rights. Why, I ask you, did Mr. Edward Jeremy, counsel for the prosecution, in his very eloquent and gilded address, not screen this part of the command circular? After all, this command circular, as elaborated by Ms. Robin Croft, was the very essence of his criminal common plan, in writing. This is the basis, so Mr. Jeremy stated, for the criminal agreement to kill high-value targets. And if that were not enough, the lawfulness of Command Circular 16 of 2016 was reiterated 3 weeks later on 22 July through the initiation and issuance of PNP Investigative Directive number 12 of 2016, which set out additional policies and guidelines in the conduct of double barrel. I think there, Madam President, if I may, we can take a break, obviously with your permission.
Bien sûr, maître, je vous remercie, Captain, je vous remercie beaucoup.
Thank you, Counsel. Thank you very much. If you can also indicate the numbers of the documents that you have referred to, that will be good. Thank you very much, says Judge Motok. We will take a break now and resume at 11:30. Thank you very much.
Hello, hi mga palangga, how are you? So, hindi natin naumpisahan ang confirmation of charges. So, ang naabutan ko lang actually, yung sinabi ni Kaufman na bakit ngayon, bakit late na nag-file ang ICC laban kay PRRD, bakit during nung mayor siya, and right after na kumalas ang ICC, ang Pilipinas sa ICC. So yun yung naabutan ko. But ganun pa man, mga kababayan, paulit-ulit nating sinasabi na itong pagpadala o pagkidnap kay PRRD ay talagang pakikipagsabwatan ng Marcos administration dito sa ICC. Kaya tama, may statement si Inday Sara, I think 2 hours ago, was it 2 hours ago? Just hang on a second, mga palangga. Ayan, Inday Sara, 1 hour ago. Okay. Okay, praying for Tatay Digong, sabi ni Jay Santillan. Okay. So, 1 hour ago, nagbigay ng statement si Inday Sara patungkol dito sa lumabas na 18 na Marines. Actually, 30 daw yung lalabas na yan, pero 18 pa lang ang lumalabas. Sabi nga natin, etong ICC hearing o pagigipit kay PRRD ay pagtatraidor ng Marcos administration ni Bangag, di ba? So kaya dapat talaga siya ay mawala na sa Pilipinas kasi nakikipagsabuatan siya sa banyaga para ipahamak, para kidnapin ang isang Pilipino at ito ay dati pang presidente dahil sa sobrang inggit ng mga hayop na ito. Okay, basahin lang muna natin. Wait a minute, yung statement ni Inday Sara 1 hour ago. Ang sabi ni Inday Sara, mga kababayan, okay, here we go. Hanga ako sa tapang ng dating mga security personnel ni Zaldico na naglakas loob na magsalta sa kanilang personal na kaalaman tungkol sa mga usaping matagal ko nang nalalaman. Hindi pangkaraniwan ang kanilang ginawa dahil posibleng buhay nila ang kapalit sa paglabas ng katotohanan. Alam mo, itong mga tauhan ni Zaldico, naniniwala ako na ito ay sinabihan ni Zaldico na na manindigan sila kung ano yung na-witness nila. Dahil si Zaldico naman ang unang nag-expose dito sa mga pictures, ng mga mali-maletang ibinayad o ibinigay kay Marcos Jr., kay Lisa Tanas at sa mga senador at mga kongresista, di ba? So sabi ni Inday, mula pa noon ay mayroon ng mga impormasyon hinggil sa umano'y pakikipag-ugnayan ng ilang opisyal ng Pilipinas sa mga investigador ng International Criminal Court o ICC at kung ano ang ginagawa nila dito sa Pilipinas. 'Di ba? Ulit-ulitin ko, ako ang unang nag-expose niyan sa inyo noong 2023 pa na sunod-sunod na natin pinakita yung passport, yung mga screenshots, yung mga business cards na ipinadala sa atin ng mga whistleblowers o mga puting ahas mula mismo sa DOJ. At ito, dapat talaga bitayin ng patiwarik silang lahat. Dahil yan si Remulla, yung DOJ na yan, ay nakipagsabwatan sa banyaga para ipahamak, para ikulong ng walang kalaban-laban ang isang Pilipino at ito ay si Pangulong Duterte. Ganon magtraidor. Kaya how much magtraidor ito mga ito? How much more ang isang ordinaryong Pilipino, 'di ba? Kayang-kayang ipapatay ng gobyerno ni Marcos kung kailan nila gusto. Kung ang former president nga, ayan, pinagkanulo nila. Sabi ni Inday Sara, bukan nito, formal akong sumulat sa Pangulo upang makuha on record ang posisyon ng administration. Ang naging tugon niya ay, okay, sabi ni, di ba nung nalaman ni Inday yan yung mga pumasok ngayong ICC sa Pilipinas at nakipagsabuatan dyan sa DOJ, ang sagot ni Bangag, we will not cooperate in any way, shape, or form. Sabi ni Inday dito, isang tahasang na pagpapakita ng mga hakbang ng ICC ay tinuturing na paglapastangan sa soberanya ng Pilipinas. Diba? Talagang kailangan managot si Bangag. Kailangan talagang dikdikin siya ng pinong-pino. Kung merong parusa na ang mga nagtraidor sa kanyang bayan ay dikdik, dapat dikdikin ng bonggang-bongga. Hi Aga, how are you? Nako, thank you sa pagmamahal nyo lahat dyan sa Vienna. Thank you so much. Okay? Nagre-recover pa ako ng aking mga eksena. Ngayon, ang mga testimonya ng dating security personnel na si Zaldico ay lalo pang nagpapatibay sa mga nauna ko ng babala kay dating Pangulong Rodrigo Duterte at Senador De La Rosa tungkol sa presensya ng ICC sa loob ng Pilipinas, hanggang sa mga pangyayaring may kaugnayan sa pagkidnap sa aking ama. Ang mga impormasyong ito ay hindi maaaring isantabi o pagwalang bahala. Ang usaping ito ay hindi usaping pampolitika. Hindi ito simpleng alitan ng mga personalidad. Ito ay tungkol sa pangunahing prinsipyo ng ating pambansang soberanya at sa limitasyon ng paghihimasok ng mga dayuhang institusyon sa domestic affairs ng ating bansa. Sovereignty is not a principle to be invoked when convenient and abandoned when expedient. Sovereignty should not depend on who benefits and should not shift with political winds. When we weaken the principle of sovereignty, we do not only affect one leader or one family. We affect the dignity of our country and the trust of our people in the institutions meant to protect them. Yun ang mensahe ni Inday Sara sa kanyang statement ngayong araw na ito. So mga palangga, paulit-ulit ko sinasabi sa inyo, itong pahingidnap ni PRD, kadahilanan, ako ay not only tinutulig, ako ay tina-target din. Since ako ang nag-expose ng lahat ng kababuyan ng gobyerno ni Marcos Jr., alam nyo naman yan, di ba? Non-stop ang pagpa-file nila ng kaso sa akin at syempre, yung kanilang death threat. Okay? Ang kanilang death threat sa akin na talagang pinapagurgur ako, kaya syempre nag-iingat din tayo. So, mga kababayan, lahat ng sabi ko nga din sa post ko a day ago, na ito na yung pinaka-tipping point kung bakit o dapat na salita or magsanib puwersa ang taong bayan para itanggalin na si Marcos Jr. Kitang-kita na lahat na nangyayaring ito, yung ICC na yan, ay walang kredibilidad, walang dignidad, dahil mismo sa statement ng 18 Marines, sila mismo may mga pictures, suportado ng mga ebidensya na sila ay nagbigay ng pera dito sa mga tiwaling opisyal ng ICC sa pakipagsabuatan ni Trillanes, ni Tambaloslos, di ba? At ngayon, ni Marcos Jr., at ngayon, dapat hindi na nga nagtatagal si Bangag dyan sa kanyang pwesto kasi habang na siya ay nakapwesto dyan, mga kababayan, araw-araw ay ninanakawan kayo. Okay? Sabi ni Modus, sana lumabas sa si Saldico na magsalta na din siya about magsasalta yan. Okay? Actually, nanaginip na naman ako nung nasa Europa ako na, may mga sasabihin pa siya at, at magsasalta pa siya. And kailangan nating, kaya nga sabi ko kay Saldico dito sa vlog ko, kailangan protektahan niya yung sarili niya na buhay siya. Sino naman ang magko-convince diyan sa 18 Marines, di ba? Na naka-witness, di lumabas na yung kanilang boss. Kailangan na rin nilang lumabas. So I hope marami pang. Pero alam mo, lahat naman ng bomba inilabas na ni Saldico. Ang kailangan na lang aksyon ng mga Pilipino. Aksyon ng mga support ng mga militar. Aksyon ng mga Marines, talaga lahat ng sandatahan na dapat bitbitin na nila si Bangag Jr. at itapon na nila sa Kumunoy. At nang matapos na yan. Kitang-kita ninyo, grabe, mali-maletang dineliver. May mga ebidensya na isinakay sa helicopter, andyan yung 18 Marines. Ano pa ba ang kailangan ninyong gawin? Namaos na nga tayo dito sa kadadakdak dito. Di ba? Sabi ni Marilu Watanabe, palangga tama ang sinabi mo tungkol sa pagpasok ng ICC. Mabuhay ka, mag-ingat ka, dahil demonyo ang kalaban. Nagkamali ba ako? Hindi tayo nagkamali. At sinabi din ni Inday Sara, di ba? Nung, I think 2020, mas simula na nawala sa gabinete. So kaya itong nangyayari ngayon sa ICC, mga kababayan, although syempre dapat pag-usapan, pero ang i-highlight natin, itong pagnanakaw ng just one second, no? Ng Marcos Jr. Excuse me. Okay? Ng Marcos Jr., yung mga kongresista, mga senador, okay? Ito yung main issue sa bayan natin, ang mga media kasabwat din. Diba? Actually, dapat pangalanan na rin yung mga media na tumanggap ng mali-maleta. Kasi napaniginipan ko, sinabi sa akin ni Zaldico, may mga media na may tumanggap din ng mga mali-maleta. I hope one day, ilabas siyang mga media na yan. Dapat ilabas kung sino sila na kasama sa pagsira ng tao, ng buhay ng Pilipino. Okay? Kaya nga, sabi nga yes, kaya dapat si Saldi, itodo niya na. Okay, i-redeem niya yung sarili niya. Although nakapag-statement na rin siya, pero kung ano pang meron siya, dapat ilabas siya na. Kasi hindi naman niya na, hindi na kailangan ng pera. I don't think kailangan pa niya ng pera, kailangan i-redeem niya yung sarili niya. Katulad nga ng sinabi ko dati, mga bata pa yung mga anak niya, it's not yet too late para ibuhos lahat ng nalalaman niya laban dito sa bangag na pamilyang ito, sa tambaluslos at sa mga senador, mga kongresista na kasama dito sa pagnanakaw at pagpapahirap sa inyong araw-araw. Teka, wait a minute. Ano to? Ngayon, mga kababayan, okay. Si Kimbot wala na yata sa yan, katulad ni Kimbo. Kaya 'di ba, gaya yung WAD committee kung paano nalang tirahin ang mga vloggers. During that time na nag-hearing sila, paano tirahin ng mga Duterte supporters, paano pahiyain, tapos yun pala, magkakasabwat sila na nagtumanggap ng pera galing sa kaban ng bayan at mali-maleta talaga ang kanilang binitbit. Okay? Dali lang, hanapin natin 'to. So, dapat talaga ito, kita mo itong kaya naman ito, itong nakalagay sa affidavit 'no, nitong, mga Marines. Kaya itong hayop na abante na 'to, dapat talaga itong mga ito, sabi ko nga, kung puwedeng dikdikin sila ng pinong-pino, kung may parusang dikdik, si Zia Adyong, 'yan yung mga personalities diyan na kung paano pahiya ang mga Duterte at ang mga vloggers na kanilang mga resource person. Okay? Etong si, ano 'to, yan si Ace Barbers, yang si Bernos, Arlene Brosas, ayan mga makakaliwang grupo, si Franz Castro, si Joel Chua, si Dalipe, si De Lima, ayan, alright. At si Dan Fernandez, si Jojo Alvarez, Jojo Ang, Jolien Baronda, yun, nakita nyo? Alam nyo, sabi ko nga dapat sa ganitong klase, tanggal na si Bangag eh. Kayo, ang mga Pilipino, grabe no, nakakalungkot lang. Kasi, dami naman lumalaban. Lahat halos, si Garin. Si Garin, si Dong Gonzales, si J. Konghon, Jervil Loristo, itong bigao na ito. Nakala mo, kinakalay kay ang kipay kapag nagsalita. Raul Manuel, 'di ba? Si Sandro Marcos, si Paulo Ortega, si Paduano, si Stella Kimbo, si Martin Romualdez, si J.G. Suarez, si Erwin Tulfo. Kaya sabi ko, kaya itong, by the way, 'di ba? Anong petsa ngayon? Feb 26, Feb 25 kahapon diyan sa Pilipinas. Yung 40 years ng EDSA Revolution na yan, sino bang nilalabanan yan? Ang nilalabanan yan ay ang mga bangag, family bangag, ang mga Marcos. Pero bakit wala si De Lima na nagsisigaw-sigaw na never again. Nasaan na itong mga sila Franz Castro, 'di ba? Itong sila yung mga NPA kanina, okay? Ng mga binanggit na mga pangalan, si Raul Manuel, okay? Lahat-lahat sila antivirus. Okay? Lahat sila. Bakit hindi sila sumisigaw? Based nga dito sa inilabas ng Marines, itong mga makakaliwang grupo, 'di ba? At mga dilawan ay tumanggap ng pera galing sa kaban ng bayan. Kaya kawawa talaga kayong mga palangga. I just don't know kung ano pang tipping point kailangan nyo. Nilabas na ni Maharlika, nilabas na ng mga Marines, nilabas na ni Zaldico. Ano pa? 'Di ba? Every time na magkaroon ng mga ganitong expose, ang gagawin ng mga bangag administration mag-optics. May huhulihin na tao, 'di ba? Yung hinuli itong si Norman Mangusin, 'di ba? Tapos yung mga issue na yan, pang cover up nila. Then ang mga mainstream media ayaw nila masyadong pag-usapan itong 18 Marines kasi yung iba sa kanila ay tumanggap din ng mali-maleta. So, saan tutungo? 'Di ba? Saan tutungo ang bayan natin? Alam nyo, nung ako ay nasa Europa, okay? By the way, I'm home. Home sweet home, okay? May jet lag pa. Nung ako'y nasa Europa, mga palangga, mararamdaman mo yung pagmamahal ng mga Pilipino sa Pilipinas. Not only kay Pangulong Duterte, but siyempre, sabi ko nga yung common goal natin, kaya tayo nagkita-kita. Shout out sa mga palangga ko sa Vienna, okay? Sa lahat, sa Munich, Croatia, Linz, saan pa ba tayo nag-ikot? That's ko nahilong-hilo na ako sa ikot. Isang buwan ba naman ako umikot-ikot? Hindi ko na matandaan yung araw. I mean, hindi ko na maalala ano ba araw ngayon kasi pagising mo, nasa ibang bansa ka na naman. Alam mo yon? Excuse me. So, dinadivert ng Bangag administration yung ng mga media and also the Bangag administration para hindi natin pag-usapan, para hindi malaman ng taong bayan yung pagnanakaw nila ng billion-billion. Right? Yeah, mga Pilipino sa Prague, o sabi ni Aga Choling, thank you palangga. Naku, ang saya-saya ng ating mga eksena dyan. So, kitang-kita mo yung pagmamahal ng mga Pilipino sa Europa, sa iba't ibang sulok ng mundo, sa bansa at syempre kay PRRD kasi naniniwala sila. Not only naniniwala, nakita nila, naramdaman nila sa kanilang mga probinsya, sa kanilang mga iskinita, sa kanilang mga lugar na kung saan noong panahon ni PRRD, natakot yung mga drug pushers, yung mga nagbebenta ng pulburon, yung mga addictus, na mag-adik-adik. Dahil nga, meron silang takot sa gobyerno na kapag sila ay nag-adik o nagbenta ng mga droga dyan sa mga iskinita para sirain ang ating mga kabataan, may kalalagyan sila. 'Di ba? So may takot. Dapat kasi talaga ang batas ay ginagawa sa mga may kasalanan. 'Di ba? Kaya ganun yung naging epekto nung panahon ni PRRD. Kaya minahal siya ng taong bayan. At yung ginagamit kasi ng mga hayop dito sa ICC na sinabi ni ni Duterte na I will kill 32 people every day, then thousands of thousands. Nasaan yun? 'Di ba? Ulit-ulitin natin yung mga pinresent nila ng prosecution, galing yun kay Trillanes, galing yun kay De Lima, galing yun sa mga kaliwang grupo na galit nung panahon ni PRRD dahil ginawa ni PRRD yung tama, 'di ba? Tama na lipulin ang mga salot sa lipunan para magkaroon ng mapayapang bayan. 'Di ba? Ano ang sinasabi ninyo kayo mga OFW, kayo mga nasa ibang bansa, like even ako. Eto, nung umuwi ako sa Pilipinas, panahon ni PRRD, inabutan ko ng $20 yung isang yung anong tawag doon parang porter ba yun? Basta doon sa airport. Ay ma'am, bawal po yan. Sabi niya, hindi po yan dito pwede. Malalagot tayo kay Tatay Digong. Yun yung sinasabi ng mga porter o yung mga nangungutong dyan sa airport. Tapos ang sabi ko naman, hindi ka naman nangutong. Ginanon ko yung pera, tinupi ko, ganun. Takot na takot. Sabi ko, hindi ka naman nangungutong, hindi ka naman nangingi. Kusa ko naman po yan bigay, pero pabulong, ganyan. Nakita niyo yung impact nung panahon na yon. So, eto yung lahat halos na na-experience ng mga Filipino abroad. Na nung panahon ni PRRD, may takot ang mga mangungutong dyan sa airport. Ano nangyari nung si Bangag? Yung mga OFW, ang kinokotongan nila. 'Di ba? Panahon ni Noynoy, nag-extort ng pera ang mga taga-immigration, taga-customs through tanimbala. 'Di ba? Binalasubas ang mga OFW na nagpapadala ng balikbayan box through bukas balikbayan box. Okay, nung pumasok si PRRD, nawala lahat 'yan. Okay? Now, pumunta na tayo kay Bangag. Ano nangyari? Mas talamak ang pangungutong, ang extortion sa airport. Kaya maraming nagmamahal kay PRRD. At hindi intensyon ni PRRD na gurgurin ang mga inosente. Yung mga pananalita niya, okay? Pananalita niya na pag hindi kayo nagbago, yun ay nagbago or pag dinestroy niyo yung bayan ko, I will gurgur you. Di ba? At ang mga nagugurgur nung time na yun ay yung mga talagang palaban at gumagawa ng katarantaduhan sa taong bayan. Alright? Kaya nga sabi ko sa inyo, kung ako ang naging presidente, baka ubus lahat. Okay? Walang matitira. Walang matitira. Kulang pa nga yun eh. Kulang pa. But huwag din natin tanggalin na every government naman, hindi perfect. Kaya meron din kasi mga tiwaling police na inaabuso nila ang batas even before PRRD. Di ba? Maraming mga police na umaabuso sa kanilang kapangyarihan na pumapatay sila ng mga inosente. Hindi naman dapat pinapatay yung mga maliliit lang na yung mga adik. Ako hindi ako sang-ayon papatayin mo yung mga adik. Bigyan mo ng chance para mabuhay. Yun ang ginawa ni PRRD Ni-rehab. Okay? Yes, i-share nyo ng bonggang-bongga yan. So, ini-rehab itong mga nalulong sa masamang bisyo. At ang daming mga testimonials dyan ng mga kamag-anak ninyo na nagbago sila dahil dito. Pero, dahil kay PRD. Pero ang pinaka, talaga ng natin ngayon, dapat i-highlight natin sa inyong mga anak, sa inyong mga kamag-anak, na si Marcos Jr., si Lisa Tanas, ay ninanakaw ang pera ninyo since 2022 pa lang. Kaya sabi ko nga sa mga kakilala pa lang sa akin dito, di ba kayo nagtataka? Ako ay isang die-hard Marcos supporter. Isa ako sa tumulong para maipanalo yung putang inang Marcos na yan na sana kunin na ni Satanas. Yang hayop na yan. Kaya nga ako nakita ko na kaagad na hindi sila para sa pagbangon ng Pilipinas. Dahil Agosto pa lang ng 2022, ako na ang isa sa pinakaunang nag-aklas laban sa mga bangag. Ako ang nag-expose sa lahat ng kanilang pagnanakaw dahil may mga taong hindi kinaya ng sikmura nila. Diyan sa mga ahensya ng gobyerno, sa Department of Agriculture, DSWD, Bureau of Customs, DOJ, lahat yan na nagbigay ng impormasyon sa akin para ipakita sa inyo lahat na ang Marcos administration ay mas magiging malala kumpara sa mga nakaraang administrasyon at sa tatay niya. Ibinoto natin siya. Ako noon, mukha tayong tanga noon. Sabi ko, naku, ang gagawin ng Marcos ay babawiin ang mga, ang tawag dito, not babawiin pagagandahin ang bayan dahil din yan magnanakaw. Ang gagawin nila pagandahin ng Pilipinas. I dream about first world country. Diba? May mga ganun tayong mga eksena. Yung pala, lalo lang palulubugin at palalain ng Pilipinas. Diyan sa walang kamatayang baha. Every year bumabaha. Every year naman kayo binabaha. Kawawa talaga ang Pilipinas. Sabi ko nga sa inyo, kung buhay ko ang kapalit, baratatatin ko silang lahat. Diba? Kung meron akong power na ganyan, meron akong superpower, lilupulin ko silang lahat. Lahat. Walang matitira. Walang matitira sa mga putang inang yan. At ipalunok ko lahat yung buong maleta sa kanila hanggat magkawarak-warak ang mga hayop na yan. You know what I mean? Kasi sobrang ginagawa Kawawa kayo Nakita niyo ba yung mga sitwasyon nyo dyan sa Pilipinas? Yung mga palanggakong hirap na hirap? Paulit-ulit na lang to, pero ito yung nangyayari sa inyo. Pagpunta nyo sa hospital, takot na takot kayo. Pag may sakit kayo sa tiyan, sa ulo, anong gagawin nyo? Lalagyan nyo lang ng tampal. Parang mga dahon-dahon, 'di ba? Hindi mawawala 'to, lalagyan ko lang ng dahon, iinom lang ako ng pito-pito, ganyan-ganyan. Masakit ang tiyan, ganyan-ganyan. Lalagyan mo lang ng hot water maglalagay ka ng hot water sa botelya ng tanduay, mainit, tapos ipagulong-gulong mo sa tiyan mo, 'di ba, hangga't mawala yung sakit, 'di ba? Dahil takot kang pumunta sa hospital, yung pala, ang sakit mo ay malala na. Pero bakit hindi ka pumupunta sa hospital? Yun pala, yung sakit ng ulo mo ay malala na kailangan ng atensyon ng doktor. Pero bakit hindi ka pumupunta sa ospital? Kasi takot ka ay hindi lang takot, wala kang pera, wala ka pang bayad. Kayo dyan, may sugat ka, nakita mo may something-something. Ay, lagyan ko na lang to ng lapunaya o oregano. Pupuk-puk-puk ka lang, 'di ba, yung holistic approach na pupukpukan mo lang diyan, yung pala kumalat na, eh, malalang sakit na pala yun. Dahil takot kang pumunta sa ospital dahil wala kang pera. Dahil yang putang inang Marcos na yan, trillion lang, yung sinabi ng 18 Marines, 805 billion. Paano nila uubusin yan? Dapat nga yan, pirasahan, tadtarin ng pinong-pino, yung mga putang inang yan. Di ba? Hayop na yan. Kulang ang bitay sa kanila, 10 ng pamilya nila. Yan ang katotohanan. Kayo naman, namang kababayan namin, takot, kababayan natin dyan, di ba? Takot na takot kayo. At ang iba sa inyo talagang, it's sad to say, pero nadadaan ng ating mga kapwa Pilipino sa 3 kilong bigas, 5 kilong bigas, ng mga ayuda, ng mga hayop na yan, ng mga kongresista, mga senador, yung mga politiko na yan. Diba? Nakukuha kayo sa ganon. Kaya nga gusto nila kayo maging bobo, ayaw nilang protectionan kayo, ayaw nilang kayong maging matalino. When it comes to education, I dream about pag naging si Bangag. Sinabi ko yan kay Bangag nung in-interview ko siya na sana yung mga yung mga bata from grade 1 to high school o from kinder to high school ay may libreng pagkain. Excuse me. Yung mga mahihirap dapat may libreng pagkain. Para kinder pa lang or hanggang sa high school, 'di ba? Hindi sila papasok sila, walang laman yung sikmura nila, no? Walang laman yung sikmura. Paano magpa-function ng utak mo ng isang bata kung walang laman ng sikmura? Excuse me. Bakit ang dami nating street children? Bakit? Ang daming nagra-rugby. Eh nakikita naman ng mga kongresista at ng mga senador, ng mga politiko sa pang-araw-araw nilang pag-travel, pagmamaneho dyan sa Maynila. Wala silang pakialam sa mga nagra-rugby na mga kabataan. Wala silang planong pagandahin ang kinabukasan ng mga kabataan dahil ang plano lang ng mga buwaka ng inang yan, nakawin ang bilyon-bilyon yung pera, then bibili ng bahay sa ibang bansa. Yes, Aga, may gamot na ako iniinom. Binigyan ako ni Lolot. Okay, na antibiotic. Thank you, Palangga. Yeah. So, ganon ang ganon ang ginagawa ng ng gobyernong ito. Kawawa talaga kayo. Sobra nung in-interview ko si Bangag, okay. Ano ko yung panahon ng tatay ko, yung mga ano na yan, yung yung pinuto lang kasi ng parang kaya hindi tayo naging Singapore dahil sa mga dilawan. At tingnan mo nagsanib puwersa na ngayon ng mga hinayupak. Ang mga yawa, di ba? Saan hahantong ang bayan natin? Saan pupunta ang mga mahihirap or, mga mahihirap? Ilan ba ang mahihirap sa atin? Eh, yung mga gumaganda lang, maayos-ayos lang na buhay sa atin, kahit papaano, yung may pamilya sa abroad, di ba? Yung may mga business, kahit papaano, di ba? At yung mga magnanakaw sa kaban ng bayan. Kawawa, no? Kawawa talaga ang bayan natin. Kaya, Ewan ko. Ang sabi niyo, ang Pilipino ay magagaling, matatapang, matatalino. Pero nakikita niyo na ninanakaw na ang kaban ng bayan. Andiyan may mga ebidensya na. May mga whistleblowers. Katulad ni Zaldico at ang kanyang mga staff. Ayaw niyo pang paniwalaan? Magkasama sila dati. Sinasabi na ni Zaldico na inutusan siya ni ganito, ni Marcos Jr., ni Tambaluslos. Tapos anong ginawa kay Zaldico? Dahil na nagsalita. It's the same thing na ginawa sa akin. Kasuhan. Okay? Kinasuhan siya ng kung ano-ano para hindi siya makauwi ng Pilipinas at ginawa siyang wanted. Ganon ang mga dapat nga pag whistleblower ka, proteksyonan ka, 'di ba? Kung may yung kasalanan mo, syempre mananagot ka din. Pero ano ginawa kay Zaldico? Papatayin nila. Anong gustong gawin kay Maharlika? Papatayin nila. Kakasuhan nila. Ito yung Marcos brand of government. At ang nasa likod niyan, si Lisa Marcos Satanas. Butod yung hayop na yung kapangit-pangit dahil nasunog na ang pagmumukha niya sa kakaadik at kinakarma sa pagnanakaw, kulang ang parusang bopis dyan or ano pa ba? Sisig. Dapat ang parusa sa kanila, ginagawa silang bopis at sisig. Kung may ganyang parusa, yan ang dapat gawin sa hayop na mag-asawang yan, kasama ang pamilya nila na nagbibigay ng pagdurusa, na nagdudulot ng pagdurusa sa inyong lahat dyan sa Pilipinas. Sabi ni Tony, Gigi, ma'am, naniwala po ba kayo na perfect timing ni Lord? Lahat may perfect timing si Lord. Okay? Nakita ninyo, nung in-expose ko, balikan na lang natin habang wala pa ito yung mga hinayupak sa ICC na yan. Si Maharlika, ang daming kumakalaban. Ang daming nagagalit. Imagine. Nung inilabas ko sa inyo bago pa yan nag-knock si Amy Marcos na ang kapatid niya ay adik. Diba? Inilabas ko yan na sinabi ni Amy Marcos na lalabas siya na I think 2024, sasabihin niya sa taong bayan, nangako siya kay Inday Sara na adik yung kapatid niya, ganyan-ganyan. Nung inilabas ko at pinangalanan ko si Daryl Yap, na diba Daryl, nag-usap tayo, ganito, ganyan-ganyan. Diba may mga optics sila, kinalaban si Maharlika ng mga minions ni Daryl Yap at Amy Marcos. Diniscredit nila ako. Then later on, nagsalita si Mangga doon sa INC, sa event ng INC, na sinabi nga na adik yung kapatid niya. Nakita niyo yung mga putang inang ito, kaya dapat hindi paniniwalaan niya mga hayop na yan. Every time na maglabas si Maharlika ng mga, mga information, actually first-hand information, dahil conversation namin yun, gagamit sila ng mga trolls optics. Walang pinagkaiba yung mga yan. Pare-pareho lang ang mga dilawan, okay? Mga bangagan, at lalo na yan si Amy Marcos, never again mag-trust sa mga putang inang yan. Ewan ko lang, sana yung mga Marines na ito, dumami pa kayo, itodo nyo na lahat yan. Ano pa ba gagawin ninyo? Diba? Total, kung kayo naman ay Marine, kayo naman ay sundalo, handa kayong mamatay ng dahil sa bayan ninyo. Do it, gawin nyo na, magtipon-tipon na kayo at ilabas na ang mga dapat ilabas. Yes. Sabi ni William, death penalty sa lahat ng mga corrupt by live cremation of gorgoring the Julo. Well, alam mo palangga, maganda yan, pero I hope mangyayari yan. Okay, now what? Ano pa? Itapon sila sa crocodile farm para may silbi sa farm. Huwag na ikulong dahil dagdag pa yan sa pakainin sa kulungan. Ayun na nga, pera pa rin ang bayan. Sabi ko nga dapat pinuhin na lang sila ng bonggang-bongga. Sabi ni Kish, you will be forever our vindicated queen. Thank you, Palangga. Okay, sabi ni Legacy of Love, Residente kami ng Quezon City at Manila pero walang napatay na adik sa area namin. Ang ginawa ng mga barangay is submit ang mga names na sa alam nila ay adik pusher. Binigyan sila ng time sumuko at magparehab. Yung ayaw umalis sa lugar namin at lumipat ng ibang lugar. Yung mga nababalita na napatay ay tao ng mga sindikato. Either takot ang mga drug lords na ikanta sila o hindi nag-remit dahil nung panahon, pahirapan makakuha ng drugs. Totoo yun, di ba? Yung mga pumapatay doon, yung mga amo nila, para namang hindi naman natin alam na mismo ang ibang mga kapulisan ay pinuno ng sindikato. Yung ibang mga pulis dyan, mga kasabwat yan ng mga sindikato ng pulburon, lalo na ngayon sa panahon ni Bangag Jr. Okay? Aha. Noon kasi nagdeklara si Duterte na sumuko para magbagong buhay ang mga adik. Pero natakot madamay ang mga police scalawags. Pinagsusuko ang mga kasapi nila na ng mga nagbebenta ng droga. Kaya mismong police na tumutumbas sa mga yan. Natatakot na ikanta. Tama. Kaya pinalabas na namatay sa tukang. Pero hindi yan karamihan sadya at planado ng mga may hawak sa kanila. Binintang lahat kay Duterte. That's true. Okay? Well, sabi ko nga, ang sabi ni Mother Chilling, yes, the truth must prevail. Free Duterte, bring home our Tatay Digong. Yun na nga, I hope may uwi si PRRD, kaya dasal na lang dyan. Pero nakita nyo na lumabas na yung 18 Marines, di ba? Nakasabwat ang Bangag Administration at ICC. So kahit anong percent natin dyan ng depensa, hindi tayo papanigan. Dahil planned na yan eh. Kumbaga paid, ano na yan eh. Done deal na yan. Yes, dapat yan si Trillanes at ipadala sa Hague at ikulong forever. Isa pa yan. Dapat yan traidor na Trillanes na yan. Hindi ng pinong-pino. Dahil wala namang ginagawa sa bayan natin. Kundi mag-traidor. I think nandiyan na sila. Dali lang. At nawala. Dali. Dito na sila.
Directive number 12 of 2016, which set out additional policies and guidelines in the conduct of double barrel. This directive instructed investigative units on how to perform their responsibilities in the case of armed confrontation during the implementation of Operation Double Barrel. The document also included an exhortation to monitor human rights violations perpetrated by PNP operating units. The term neutralization itself is, of course, not defined anywhere in any of these documents as meaning to kill, a point the prosecution itself conceded at that moment in time when it was seeking the opening of an investigation. And I refer, Your Honours, to ICC 01 on 21, document number 7. So the prosecution, throughout its pre-confirmation brief, invites this chamber to find, by inference, that neutralization means murder, and even carves it in stone as its formal statement of the common plan. But we, the defense, can show that the term neutralization can only mean the use of self-defense where officers' lives are endangered. For this, the text of the circular must be read in the context of the governing framework and other PNP directives. It is our submission that across the political, legislative, judicial, and law enforcement contexts, the consistent articulation has always been that neutralization denotes lawful restraint. At the executive and operational level, the Chief of the Philippine National Police, Ronald de la Rosa Bato, publicly clarified in 2017 that neutralization means arrest. Furthermore, in an official transcript dated 28 October 2024, the former Chief of Police, De La Rosa, testifying for the Committee on Accountability of Public Offices and Investigations, testified that the term neutralization was anchored in the PNP Operational Procedures Manual, where it is specifically and strictly defined. Let us just have a look at what he said. And for your ease of reference, we will also display the said passage in the PNP Operational Procedural Manual to which De La Rosa referred, which incidentally was published in 2021. Neutralization, and I quote, "A police intervention in strict accord with the use of force continuum and/or principle of proportionality on the use of force purposely to contain or stop the unlawful aggression of the offender. This may include an arrest, capture, surrender, or other acts to subdue the suspect." It strikes us as rather mind-boggling that the prosecution should have failed to appreciate the significance of this. It was aware of De La Rosa's speech because they disclosed it to us. But the prosecution's investigators clearly never bothered to read the procedural manual to which De La Rosa was referring. In fact, we know that they didn't, because it's not on their list of evidence. Within the judicial sphere, when the terminology was examined before the Supreme Court of the Philippines, in petitions challenging aspects of the anti-drug campaign, the government defended the circulars on the basis that they did not confer a license to kill. The Supreme Court of the Philippines, however, to date, has declined to issue any ruling declaring the campaign unconstitutional, has declined to invalidate circulars, and has declined to rule to date that neutralize or neutralization means to kill. The Supreme Court's treatment of the issue is particularly instructive. The court observed that the wording was neither novel nor introduced during the Duterte administration. It had already appeared, for example, in the 2014 revised PNP Manual on Anti-Illegal Drugs Operations and Investigation. In other words, the term formed part of the existing police vocabulary. The court further clarified that the mere inclusion of the term in a circular does not render that instrument unconstitutional, especially where the circular expressly mandates compliance with internationally accepted legal principles, public policy, and the full observance of human rights, as we showed you earlier. No circular has been invalidated on this basis, nor has it ever been established at the highest level of domestic judiciary that to neutralize means to kill. The judicial record does not sustain such an equation. In each institutional setting, therefore, the term has been situated within ordinary policing powers and constrained by the lawful use of force framework. The testimonies of those operating within that framework, the prosecution's witnesses no less, are aligned with this documentary record. For example, witnesses P1158 and P1170 explained that neutralize means to arrest or to incarcerate through legal means. It did not mean to kill. Witnesses P1050 and P1174 confirmed that lethal force arose only where a suspect's resistance placed an officer's life at risk, reflecting the ordinary doctrine of self-defense and consistent with Mr. Duterte's repeated public declarations that force was justified only in such circumstances. P1214 further indicates that operational decisions were made by officers on the ground within established protocols. So,
Maître, je suis désolée de vous en...
I'm sorry to interrupt, counsel, but once again, you need to be specific and provide the document reference number. You must specify the document number, the reference number for us.
if I may, Madam President,
Merci beaucoup,
of
ma-
course,
Thank you very much.
an understanding with the learned chambers legal officers that we would be able to provide references after the hearing. But of course, the document that I was referring to is PHL OTP 00090518-R01. So, Madam President, Your Honours, taken together, the manual, the public clarifications by police leadership, the state's position before the highest court in the Philippines, and even the prosecution's own corroborative witness testimony, all of this material demonstrates a coherent and consistent understanding that neutralization was articulated as lawful incapacitation through arrest and related measures, not as a policy of killing. And if the prosecution's case for the common plan in counts 2 and 3 is based on Command Circular number 16 of 2016, we might as well pack up and go home because Mr. Duterte is simply not guilty. However, for the sake of completeness, I continue. The fifth indicator of a common criminal plan, as alleged by the prosecution in paragraph 28 of the pre-confirmation brief, appears to be the concerted broadcasting of inflammatory speech. Here, the prosecution once again selectively cites excerpts from 2016 media interviews with Ronald de la Rosa, Bato, and Vitaliano Aguirre, which suit its purpose and case theory, while totally ignoring the more unequivocal comments in those interviews which destroy its case. Regarding the interview with De La Rosa, mentioned in paragraph 28, after supposedly inciting a crowd of drug addicts to cause criminal damage to the properties of their narcotic suppliers, the newly elected chief of police states, "It's either you will die from police gunfire," and he adds, "if you resist." That's PHL OTP 0000849, page 2. Likewise, with the comments in an Al Jazeera interview, PHL OTP 00090340, comments attributed to Aguirre, from which the prosecution imputes criminality to Rodrigo Duterte by citing Aguirre's comment that the administration's policy was to stop crime and kill drug lords. Such throwaway comments reflect on Aguirre alone. And God forbid, we're not alleging that Aguirre did anything wrong. Especially when, in the very same Al Jazeera interview, Aguirre states, not once, but twice, that the policy of Duterte himself was for the police to use lethal force only in self-defense. We can display that on the screen, and the part I want to read is highlighted. And President Duterte was very clear on this matter, he said, Aguirre, that there will be no killing of unarmed offenders, meaning to say that you use force only when your life is in danger. Later on, in the very same interview, Aguirre would repeat the same theme which exculpates Mr. Duterte, PHL OTP 00090340 at page 4. And I read out the relevant passage which is highlighted once again. They are supposed to arrest them, but when they fight back, then the president has instructed them that they must first protect themselves. So much for Mr. Jeremy's elastic mouth theory. Even he thought that Duterte's speech was bifurcated. And even if he did think so, his so-called perpetrators did not. So why does the prosecution cite the excerpts which support its case so selectively? Well, I'm not going to impute any malfeasance, but I can hazard a wild guess. I would suggest that the people reviewing the prosecution's massive databases for suitable evidence are performing keyword searches. Most likely, some of the most utilized operands were the words kill and perhaps sometimes neutralization or neutralize. Once the member of the prosecutor's staff has his hit, he excises the excerpt, rejoices that he can slot it into the predetermined case theory, and does not bother to read the rest of the item of the evidence, where the exonerating evidence is unequivocal. Turning to the sixth indicator of the supposed criminal plan, as set out in paragraph 29 of the pre-confirmation brief. None of the speeches imputed to the former president, nor the use of what the prosecution calls dehumanizing language, dehumanizing Dehumanizing language by the alleged co-perpetrators suggests criminality. I would suggest that it is within the bounds of acceptable, albeit extreme political discourse, to refer to drug users in such a way as beasts, animals, or to the barangays as being plagued by the drug menace. Well, the last one is true. You can hardly expect populist politicians and law enforcement officers to refer to drug pushers and criminals as upstanding pillars of the local community. I really do feel that the prosecution is at a loss if this is its circumstantial evidence for proving the existence of a common criminal plan. The same goes for the seventh supposed indicator of criminality, which is based on the names created for the two police operations, Double Barrel and Tokhang, along with their supposed evocation of firearms metaphors. While the source for this particular gem, witness P1207, a self-confessed murderous villain, might have guns perpetually on his mind and insert their imagery into his daily speech, it does not mean that those who formulated the anti-drugs policy were acting under a similar caprice when they devised the nomenclature for these two particular police operations. And of course, there were other police operations with completely different imagery, such as the one-time, big-time operation referred to by a few prosecution witnesses, and the riding in tandem operation. The mind can only boggle as to what type of nefarious imagery the prosecution believes that that last title evokes. None of the indicators I have mentioned up until now have shown in any way a mutual meeting of minds between alleged co-perpetrators, evincing a communality of purpose or an agreement to act in an illegal fashion. Of course, the prosecution has shown us pictures of the alleged co-perpetrators uttering comments similar to those issuing from Rodrigo Duterte. But this does not indicate a meeting of minds, as I will elaborate shortly. The eighth factor, purportedly evincing a plan of agreed criminality, is set out for a solidarity of intent as would be required for a common criminal plan, or a common plan. Concerning and coming to the ninth category of circumstantial proof for a common criminal plan, the prosecution relies on what it believes to be the Duterte's administration's unabashed publication of statistics recording the number of deaths occasioned in the context of the so-called war on drugs. But let us just look at how and where the statistics relied upon were being published. In two government reports, the first of which being the Duterte administration's year-end report for 2017, totaling 63 pages, covering every sector of government and the economy, and of which just 2 pages are devoted to policing activities. We can give you the document ID number shortly. It's on the screen. While the deaths of 3,967 drug personalities mentioned are indeed recorded, as Ms. Robin Croft so helpfully pointed out in her presentation, and are not insubstantial, these deaths comprise a fraction of the 118,287 total arrests for drug-related activities, especially when the government is conducting special operations in a concerted drive to curb the narcotics problem. Such statistics are certainly not indicative of a wholesale policy of murder designed to supplant the process of law. If they were, then certain Latin American state parties would have regularly equaled or exceeded the Philippines in the number of law enforcement killings per capita of the population. What is quite egregious, however, regarding the prosecution's reliance on the 2017 Key Achievement Report is the way in which it glosses over, or rather ignores, those pages which do not suit its case theory. Take, for example, pages 28 of the document, which highlights the fact that 1,900 drug-related investigations have been carried out against law enforcement officers in the preceding year, with 375 police officers being dismissed, including the 2 policemen involved in the murder of Carl Arnaiz, who were later convicted and sentenced to life imprisonment. These policemen were affiliated with the Caloocan City Police Station, and where, so the report mentions, 1,000 personnel belonging to that station was sent for retraining. To conclude, this document, far from being evidence of a conspiracy hatched between co-perpetrators, is in fact a testament to the Duterte administration's respect for the rule of law and written proof of its intolerance for rotten apple police officers. As for the second official publication, which is supposed to substantiate the criminal plan, we turn to the 2016 annual report issued by the Philippine National Police. The statistics are quoted, with all respect, in a misleading fashion. The tables used by De La Rosa, and particularly the pie chart, show a remarkably low incidence of deaths in comparison to arrests and voluntary surrenders. Obviously, the misleading aspect of that is the prosecution's representation of the statistics, not De La Rosa's. So, coming to the 10th and final source of circumstantial evidence, supposedly supporting the mutually agreed nature of the criminal plan. And this is the fact that the extrajudicial killings, to quote the prosecution's words, followed the same patterns and modus operandi, with the perpetrators covering their tracks. But here, let me ask a question which begs an answer. If the Duterte administration was so barefaced as to openly declare its intent to kill drug users and pushers and celebrate this, as the prosecution argues, in official governmental publications, why would it encourage the perpetrators to go to such lengths to disguise such an intent? I mean, of course, anything's possible. But I'm just pointing out the internal contradiction in the prosecution's case theory. In any event, as they say in English, there is more than one way to skin a cat. And the differing types of modus operandi that we have encountered in the prosecution's 49 incidents of murder involve all conceivable modes of butchery, ranging from strangulation, suffocation, to stabbing and shooting. Now, assuming that the prosecution can overcome the hurdle of proving the existence of a common criminal plan, how has it shown that the so-called co-perpetrators coordinated between themselves to reach a mutual agreement to execute it? Well, it hasn't. All it can do is show a selection of comments made by Mr. Duterte's closest colleagues in government, and all of which take their rhetorical cue from him. The prosecution then artificially defines the intended individuals, the identified individuals, as a collective of co-perpetrators. Now, common law jurisdictions, such as the one I come from, are familiar with these issues in the context of the law of conspiracy. The federal rules in the United States, for example, allow the statements of co-perpetrators to be used as circumstantial evidence, one against the other, to establish the existence of a conspiracy, but require that these statements be made during and in furtherance thereof. Narrative venting, which is what all these supposed co-perpetrators did, the ones identified by the prosecution, does not further the criminal objective. In furtherance thereof means that the statement relied on must advance the objectives of the conspiracy, such as through reassurances, updates, or actions taken to avoid detection. Now, I do realize, Your Honours, that there isn't too much jurisprudence on this matter, but let us look at it logically. Where can one really draw the line if it is sufficient to infer a mutual agreement to execute a criminal plan if we rely only on the statements of the people in the vicinity of a criminally verbose suspect because of the same quality of verbosity it alleges? This is what could be called bootstrapping logic, building on limited information with the very same information in an attempt to validate that information or to create a structure there without. Put simply, the prosecution has advanced its cart before its horse. It has merely selected a number of individuals working alongside the former president who made similarly offensive comments and has then called them co-perpetrators. Instead of seeking evidence which might shed light on the interactions of these individuals between one and another and construing a criminal conspiracy therefrom, should the evidence even support such a hypothesis, the prosecution has taken its preconceived and predetermined premise of a criminal plan and forcibly superimposed it on these individuals. The artifice of the prosecution's working methodology in conjuring up this criminal collusion becomes even more apparent if we examine the evidence emanating from the crime-based perpetrators themselves on a granular level. especially from the prosecution's own star witnesses, 2 of 3 of whom supposedly formed the hardcore of a more limited organization referred to earlier in my submissions. I'm trying to comply with redactions. P1, for example, a self-confessed murderer whose recruitment by the prosecution will be examined elsewhere, was asked about the common criminal plan of his associates up to 2017. And this is what he had to say. Every time somebody was at fault against the government of Rodrigo Duterte, we didn't bother to send them to prison. We would just kill them. That's PHL OTP 0001 2584 at lines 248 to 250. Okay, and that was the audio which I just quoted, and here we have the transcript. PHL OTP 0001 2376 hyphen R02, lines 248 to 250. So, having given you that quote from P1, I would say that as far as this witness was concerned, the common plan was not a refined policy of cleaning up the streets, but rather a killing frenzy of the political opposition. Obviously, no such policy existed, and no such policy is alleged. P3, whose evidence relates to the presidential period, describes a similar orgy of killing without rhyme and without reason, but not drug addicts, nor alleged criminals, but rather was so petrified of not meeting this quota of slaughter that he was randomly grabbing and killing just so that there would be something to report on TV for the one-time, big-time operation. Now, I ask you, how can P3 have been operating under a clear criminal direction to target drug users for murder, criminals for murder, when he states that on occasion he would perform so-called clean arrests? Prosecution's witness, P3. He's not clear when he's actually following their supposed criminal theory or when he's is. What are clean arrests? These are arrests subsequent to which the apprehended criminal would be handed over for a judicial process. And so with that, I believe, I have exhausted the first limb of the objective requirement for indirect co-perpetration and have shown conclusively that there was no mutually agreed common criminal plan. Madam President, there are 10 minutes to go. I will start with the concept of essential contribution, which is indeed the second limb that I want to talk about with respect to this mode of liability, which requires the prosecution to show objectively that Mr. Duterte himself made an essential contribution to the furtherance of this scheme of criminality, and what is more, that subjectively he was aware that he was making such a contribution. This is what us Latin-speaking lawyers would call the sine qua non test. Or to put it another way, did these 49 murders, which the prosecution has identified, occur specifically because of Rodrigo Duterte's involvement? Or, to make the logic a whole lot simpler, would Rodrigo Duterte's withdrawal from this criminal scheme to target suspected criminals, as alleged by the prosecution, have led to the avoidance of these 78 deaths? Let us see where this test is set out in the Ali Koshaib trial judgment. Paragraph 796. And I'm going to quote the essential part for the purpose of the essential contribution. The accused must make an essential contribution without which the commission of the offence would not be possible. To hold an accused liable as a co-perpetrator under Article 25(3)(a) of the statute, it has to be established inter alia that he or she had control over the crime by virtue of his or her essential contribution to it and the resulting power to frustrate its commission. Well, here, I would like to show you the statistics pertaining to the rate of killings since the former president has left power and the responsibility for law and order has passed into the hands of President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. I rely on a report published by academics at the Third World Studies Center in the University of the Philippines in the context of what is called the Dahas Project. And trust me, the authors of this report, comprising weekly statistics on the first year of the Marcos administration, from 2022 to 2023, are no great friends of the former president, Mr. Duterte. This report was even cited, I remember, in a Rappler article, but it's to be found on our list of evidence. DHL D36 0006 0001, pages 0006 to 0010. The report for the first year of the Marcos administration showed that out of 342 killings, 160 were at the hands of state agents. And the figures and the statistics just kept on rising, with the second year of the Marcos administration, 2023 to 2024, showing an increase in deaths at the hands of vigilantes, albeit a decrease in deaths at the hands of law enforcement officers, from 46.8% to 34%. Hardly a statistic to be proud of. So, with all the prosecution's fancy bar charts, I'm pretty sure that if they were to recreate them for the period of 2 years after Duterte left power, they wouldn't have room left on their computer screen. The numbers would be so sky high. The conclusion is that there is no reason to believe that Duterte's disappearance from the political scene would have frustrated the ongoing incidents of murder at the hands of state agents or vigilantes. Clearly, I'm forced to ask myself whether anyone on the other side of this room has thought of investigating the Marcos regime and the related phenomenon and holding someone accountable. Why are my colleagues sitting to their right, the victims' representatives, not clamoring for accountability for those deaths? Or is it of no consequence now that Mr. Duterte is sitting in the ICC Detention Center. I've reached a natural break, Madam President, in my submission. With your permission, I would like to continue after lunch.
Judge Murdoch. Thank you very much, Mr. Kaufman. We will suspend the hearing now for 90 minutes to resume at 2 p.m. Thank you very much.
Okay, idlip muna tayo.